we also sometimes need to just, like, as you just clearly showed, stick to your values and also show like boundaries and tell that something we are not doing. And before, I think you clearly also pointed out what are the challenges when it comes to cooperating with state actors, but also where there are certain entry points, especially on a local level. And as Katja was saying before, also for the audience, we can get back to this topic with your questions later on. But before, there are 3 more panelists here, and we'll continue now with Emin. Emin, you recently started the Restart initiative, which is focusing on the connection for economic and social development in South Caucasus. Maybe you can tell a bit what this is all about, and also elaborate maybe a bit on how culture and economic development, how this is connected from your perspective, how cooperation can be organized there, and also maybe what are limits of this cooperation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. As you told, I have a very special connection with Chris, because when I came to Berlin, also as a political refugee, I remember when we had this idea to create a media organization, and we had no money, no resources. We just asked Chris, maybe you can give us some space. They said, we have no space, but we have this basement, this cellar, and which was in a messy situation, but we cleaned it up and we created something there, which which now which we started then, and now it has made until it has. I looked at Instagram today; it's 1 million followers. So Azerbaijan has 10 million people, and its YouTube, Facebook channels have all about plus minus 1 million followers, and it has outreach of 20-30% of the country. And it's one of the few independent media institutions. So thank you for starting us up back then. But I left Benan TV like I think 4 years ago or something like that, and I had a burnout. For 2 years I did nothing and learned professionally to do nothing, which was very hard because I was a very hyperactive person. And 2 years ago I decided to create something else. We call it now Restart Initiative. By the way, it's Georgia-based organization, so we registered this organization in Georgia. And what we are doing is we want to approach the development from the point of view of economic and social development. And so one of the projects we are doing is about it's Armenia-Azerbaijan peace dialogue. So what we do, we decided, I will not go into the very hard and controversial and long topic of, explaining you Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, but we had 2 wars, and the recent war was 2 years ago, and after the war, I decided that, we need to try something else, because for 30 years, there were many projects, and I was also, as a coordinator of Friedrich Ebert Foundation Azerbaijan, brought 2 times Azerbaijani journalists, politicians, activists to Armenia, and I participated in many Armenia-Azerbaijan, events, peace dialogues. Some of them organized, some of them I was participant, and then I was really disappointed because people meet, drink wine, dance, hug each other, but nothing changed for 30 years. And then the second war came, and after this war, there was a new situation, and I thought that what was missing in this peace dialogue was really the lack of there was no project, according to my knowledge, where we would try to connect Armenia, Azerbaijan economically. And And so the situation changed so much that suddenly also the important regional players like Russia and Turkey were also interested more to push for opening communications between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's still not open, but there are negotiations, and we thought 2 years ago it's time to approach this conflict transformation and resolution also from this point of economic connectivity. As you know, this is how France and Germany managed to come to their situation from 40s to where they are now. And I'm also a strong believer that if two countries and nations can connect economically, I'm not saying this is the only solution and this will help 100%, but we have not tried it for 30 years, so why not to try it now? And that was missing, what was missing actually in this dialogue. So our organization is launched a series of dialogues. Our partner in Germany is Heritage School, and what we did in June, we invited experts from Armenia and Azerbaijan here in Berlin and discuss. Our main topic was transport. So how do we open transport routes between Armenia and Azerbaijan? And I was in this dialogue for 30 years, and usually we would invite activists, journalists, NGO people, and I worked myself in the NGO sector for many, many years. But these were not the people who had power, economic power, political power, really to change things, at least not in Azerbaijan and also partly in Armenia. So this time, it was interesting. We had, in this dialogue from Armenia, the head of the biggest transport company in Armenia. So it was very unusual for me to see, two very rich Armenians coming to dialogue on opening transport, which actually tells you that there is now a very rare window of opportunity, because if business people come to such dialogues, it means, they smell something. And they smell money, they smell opportunities. And, it's not a bad thing. I think we have to be open to use it and to take it, this dialogue, in this direction, where finally these roads and railroads can be opened, and trade, when people start trading, traveling, even if we disagree on, issues, and we see them differently. For example, who first cooked dolma, or whom belongs this or that part of the territory, or whom belongs this or that song. But I think sometimes business and trade can help us, to see each other, to start understanding each other, to have interest in not starting another war. This is not to say that cultural initiatives or other initiatives or bringing together youth or women or other groups is not important. Because I had a couple of articles attacking us that the economic connectivity is not going to solve this conflict. I personally never claimed that it can or it should be done exclusively. I think it's a combination of all the efforts and in all areas can bring results, including engaging the governments, including engaging various groups in society, from civil society and so on. And so other dialogues that we plan will be on water management, on energy, two very important areas as well, especially for Armenia, Azerbaijan. We have rivers and lakes that are both basically run between Armenia and Azerbaijan and Georgia, and reservoirs. We need to negotiate how to manage them together. So that will be one of the next topics. We'll also have a topic on trade. And that is what we are doing now. And I also have the YouTube show where I try to invite more Armenian and Azerbaijani participants of our dialogues, so they can share their perspectives without framing them as usually Azerbaijani or Armenian media would frame Azerbaijani or Armenian guests. Because I was recently invited to one Armenian media to make an interview, and they sent me the list of questions that they would ask me. And Armenian and Azerbaijan media, if Armenian media has someone from Azerbaijan, they start basically usually asking the questions. Okay, since Azerbaijan is authoritarian, it's dictatorship, so they want kind of you as a guest from Azerbaijan to confirm the picture that they have about Azerbaijan. And the same in Azerbaijan, if they invite someone from Armenia, they would gladly invite someone who will, say that, this part of territory belongs to Azerbaijan, or it doesn't belong to Azerbaijan, and they say, you see, this is who you are, and I try always, in these interviews, but also, I want to connect you to cultural diplomacy, because media is a very important part of it. And I hope we'll organize also some dialogue on culture, on media, on different also dimensions of cultural diplomacy. I think it's very important to, when you invite people from the other side, not to try, to ask them just certain questions to confirm your stereotypes about this nation, society, or country, but also to try to see and understand, and especially I think media has a responsibility to do that, because when you don't do that, what happens is you have one idea about this country, and then some big change happens, and you say, well, we didn't know, you had no idea that this country or this nation had many other sides. So I think it's media's also responsibility to show the different sides of these nations and so on. So I will stop here. I just briefly shared my ideas of what we do and what I think is important for media to do. But if you will have questions, I will answer later.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emin, for this very insightful intro to what you're currently doing. I will have time for questions also from the audience right after the presentations. For now, I would just like to thank you for this. I think it's very interesting to see that also someone like you, who has a lot of experience in peace dialogues as a human rights defender, has this background and brings it into a new sphere, like economic cooperation, and tries to, also with all the knowledge you have, all the experience you have, to explore this new field. And I really find this extremely interesting, and I would also like to learn more about this later on. And as you said yourself, of course, then in the end it's also the question of how actually connect those different sectors, because obviously, as you said yourself, economic cooperation alone, and we have quite recent examples for that, will not prevent any conflict or even war. So there needs to be also reach out to the other spheres, and you contributed with some examples how also media cooperation could look like in the sphere of cultural diplomacy. So thank you very much for this. We'll now continue on our panel. Nukri, you have done a lot of research about cooperation of especially societies within the Eastern Partnership when it comes to cultural diplomacy and how they can actually work together, and also a lot about identity and self-perceptions. So yeah, we would be very happy to share some of your insights of your research.
Thank you. I would like to start with a quote by great Georgian Armenian director Sergei Parajanov, who was sent to prison for Ukrainian nationalism. And it goes like this. I'm Armenian, born and raised in Georgia, and I was sent to prison for Ukrainian nationalism. And and his fate, I think, vividly illustrates how complicated our identities are in the region, how interconnected we are, and how and also like he was sent to Russian prison. So like and how colonialism works in peculiar ways. Very often, people who started doing the colonial scholarship in post-Soviet space started referring to its like kind of equivalent from South Asia or South America. But that led us to basically pro-Russian left in mostly in Europe, to be honest. And our disappointment in our allies, in our friends who we thought were on the same page with us, led us to understanding, but this happened even before a full-scale invasion, that we have to concentrate on each other, on our region, on alliance within the region and building agency, and also understanding our agency, because to be honest, I got tired of explaining to people, first of all, where Georgia is, and then second of all, that I don't speak Russian, and then that I don't have to prove that I have a right to exist because I'm European. No, I have the right to exist because I'm a human, not because I'm European, white, Georgian, or whatever. And when the full-scale invasion started, we were in shock. We were very much afraid of our own safety, of our own lives, because Georgia is in many ways in a similar situation as Ukraine and Moldova. So, and our relations with Russia were even worse also because of the 2008 war. And but one thing also that brought this war and bad relations with Russia is that fighting with disinformation is easier because we don't have cultural ties with Russia. We can't go to Russia. We need visa. It's very hard to get. So like, for the last 20 years, people have not really been so tied with this propaganda machine, and not so dependent also on like kind of immigrants in Russia. That's why Georgia, and because of like relative freedom and democracy in the country, and I say relative because it's not absolute, and I will explain why. We have, Georgia has become a point of meeting and registering organizations also, all kinds of formal and informal peace-building work, and also sanctuary for political refugees from Azerbaijan first, first waves were coming from Azerbaijan, then after 2020 Belarus uprising from Belarus as well, after 2021 protests in Russia also from Russia, and then because of the full-scale invasion, also Ukrainian people. So at this point, in seaside town of Batumi, if you go on the streets, it's like mostly Russian-speaking groups. And there are some activists and feminists who came with these waves. What happened is that our government was trying to kind of smoothly maintain like certain kind of image of not like, I don't know, like not openly opposing to Russia. Like, for example, they will condemn the war, they go to Bucha and Emin, but the next day they will be saying that, oh, Ukraine is losing anyways, Europe is not helping, so like we can't be too loud about this. They are very much manipulating fear of people, and these fears are very legitimate and not just triggers, but at the same time they are using it as their political like tool of manipulation. They cut all kinds of all kinds of help that was provided for Ukrainian refugees last month, and basically people were left on their own. And from the very start, they didn't really have like any kind of vivid position in terms of political or humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. And what happened is that like the public, who is very much supportive of Ukraine, took over this responsibility. You might have seen like the huge support demonstrations in Tbilisi. They didn't cover it so much, but actually in every big town of Georgia there were like really, really big demos like that. And the civil society, including like business, especially small entrepreneurs, really organized themselves to assist displaced people and still carry on providing different kinds of help. So when I started doing these interviews, I also found out that there is a more collaboration between Ukrainians, Belarus, and Russians, and I was a bit shocked about like involvement of Russians, because for Georgians, involvement of Russians in any kind of activity is a big trigger warning, and for me it was a bit strange that this is still happening. But then later I found out that it's not happening. It's quite painful collaboration sometimes. Sometimes it's very smooth because of the shared values and language. And because also like Georgia is a place where mostly like political prisoners and like people already involved in anti-Putin and anti-regime activities are coming to. But at the same time, for us, still remains the question: what do we do to the triggers? What do we do to internalize imperialism? And then the next question that came with it is that what do we do with, like us, feminist peace builders who have been against war and militarism? What do we do with our anti-militarist sentiment in the light of such unfair and unequal war? And like my Ukrainian friend said, like, like where do I stick this like anti-militarism now when bombs are falling on people's heads? And we started to mobilize the network all around post-Soviet space, and included Central Asia as well. And started having conversation basically, and a lot of things are still like open questions. Obviously, there is still a lot that remains like not like so easily agreed upon. But for us right now, there is not much space left for abstract theoretical bullshit, pardon my French, because we were really angry where our icons from academia, from feminist scholarship, signed a totally shameful petition against war, and somehow those people in prominent Western universities think that they understand anti-militarism, they have anti-militarist stance and understanding of how it should work better than us, and that I don't know, in the end, everything that is happening is putting us in between two fires of how to negotiate our inner colonial situation from Russia, but also how to negotiate this and let the rest of the world understand what is happening in real life. One thing that we agreed on, for example, was that apart from concentrating on arm Ukraine, also concentrate on disarm Russia and stop buying Russian gas. And this kind of discussions also help us build trust between each other. And among my respondents who currently live in Georgia, one of the most important cities, especially the ones who come from the oppressive regimes like Belarus, Azerbaijan, and Russia, was that the reason they want to stay and go on working from Georgia is because they can trust people around them. And friendship also was mentioned in the beginning, and friendship is also a very important thing in this situation. When we talk about how much can these initiatives function to, I'm finishing. There are limits, and the limit is primarily that, what you already said, you do these dialogues, you do all this piecework, and in the end of the day, some men in suits will decide what will be the position, where the resources will go, and who will be the enemy tomorrow, and who not. Especially in the countries where there is no democracy, I don't know, no matter how many people will protest in the streets of Belarus, Lukashenko regime is not gonna stop aiding Russia in the war. And this is the reality that we have to face, and this is also one open question that we still have. And the last open question is that what do we do with the rising nationalism within our societies and our existence attached to this nationalism that, as we have seen throughout the history, always ends bad. And now it's not time to speak about nationalism on having large discussion about it, but it is something that is in the background of our minds, and it is something that constantly allows I think keeping it in the background of mind also allows us to think about what can be the solutions beyond nation states, beyond our national identities. Especially for those like me, I'm Abkhazian Georgian refugee myself of war, and how can we understand and fight from more complicated positionalities than just as victims of one or the other kind of colonialism and bearers of one or the other nationality.
Thank you so much for those insights. I think you, especially now, you were touching upon very big questions indeed, like how to overcome. Also, maybe nationalist narratives inform something different. Maybe that's also